Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing my most anticipated fantasy romance releases of 2025. Alright guys, so I film this video every December where I share my most anticipated fantasy romance releases for the following year. Now there are a lot of recommendations in this video, and I'm going to be providing a spoiler-free plot synopsis for every single book, so we are just going to get right into it. Now if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram, Goodreads, and Patreon, all linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about these fantasy romance books. So starting off with books that are releasing in January, first up we have Immortal. Now I believe this is a young adult romantasy, and in this story we are following the heir to a kingdom that after angering the immortal queen, this kingdom is forced to serve the gods. Now our main character is trying to find a solution. Obviously she does not want her people to have to serve these immortal gods, and she ends up going to the god realm in order to uncover secrets that she might be able to use to her advantage. Well, while she's there, she meets the god of war, and they end up forming some sort of alliance, and I believe it's a romance between them, so it sounds really good, and I cannot wait to read it. And next up is Onyx Storm. This is the third book in the Empyrean series that starts with Fourth Wing. I cannot wait for this book to release. I absolutely loved Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. I'm actually about to do a reread of Iron Flame, so I can do a recap video. Now, I can't really get into the plot of Onyx Storm because it will give away all of the spoilers, but if you're unfamiliar with Fourth Wing, we are following Violet Sortingale, and she grew up her entire life believing that she was going to become a scribe. Instead, when she comes of age, her dragon rider mother tells her that no daughter of hers is going to become a scribe. Instead, she will have to attend Dragon Rider University, where she will have to compete against other cadets in the hopes of claiming a dragon, learning how to ride it, and gaining magical abilities that she can use to protect her community, and the story goes from there. Once again, I absolutely love the series, and the way Iron Flame ended, I need answers. So while I am okay with the fact that it has taken Rebecca Yarros a little bit longer to put out book 3 than it took her to put out book 2, I definitely think it's going to be worth the wait. So this is one of my most anticipated releases of 2025. And also releasing in January is the Starlight Heir. Now this is an adult fantasy romance that apparently draws inspiration from Greek mythology. And in this story, we are following Soraya. Now Soraya is an accomplished bladesmith, and seeking adventure, she ends up accepting an invitation to the capital. However, when she gets there, she soon finds that the capital is searching for the Starbringer, a woman that might harbor magical abilities. Well, Soraya realizes she might be that woman, so she ends up going on the run with the Prince of the Kingdom's half-brother, and apparently they face a lot of dangers, political intrigue, and things of that nature. So I don't think I've read anything else by this author, but this book sounds really good, and another one I cannot wait to pick up. And next up is Where Did You Go?, which is the third book in the Infatuated Fae adult fantasy romance series that starts with How Does It Feel? Now, I absolutely loved How Does It Feel? I also enjoyed the second book, just not quite as much as that first book, so I have been very patiently waiting for book 3 to drop. It is also one of my most anticipated releases of the year. Now, if you're unfamiliar with How Does It Feel, which is the first book, in this story, we are following a girl that when she's very young, she believes she sees a fae. So because of this, she becomes obsessed with animals with wings, and when she grows up, she is researching a type of endangered moth. So one day when she is going to try to find said moth, she ends up finding a portal that leads her to the Unseelie Court, where she is immediately almost killed so many times by the Prince of the Unseelie Court. And it's their romance, and it's so unhinged, but also absolutely amazing. So I will say the series probably isn't for everybody. There is some darker elements. Definitely check trigger warnings, but overall, I absolutely loved it. And next up, we have Visions of Darkness. Now, this book sounds absolutely epic. In the story, we are following Arya, and Arya goes into a nightmare realm every night where she fights these shadow monsters known as Kruen with her soulmate named Pax. Now, these crewmen are able to bring chaos into the human world, and apparently they start being able to do that more readily, so Arya, along with Pax, have to find a way to stop them. And I don't know, that sounds absolutely awesome, so I am so stoked to pick that up when it comes out. And last up for books releasing in January, we have The Empress. Now, this is a new adult fantasy romance, and I actually believe this features the fake dating trope, and that is a trope I don't see in a lot of fantasy romances, so I am very excited. Now, I believe this story is following a young woman that after finding a tarot card laying in the snow, she picks it up and it transports her to an evil kingdom known as Towerfall. Now, when she gets there, she's saved by a mysterious stranger who ends up offering her a deal. If she will pretend to be his wife, he will help her get into the palace, and hopefully from there they'll be able to find a way to get her back to her home. And I don't know, that sounds really good. Once again, I don't see a lot of fantasy romances that feature fake dating, so I feel like this will be a very fun and unique read. And moving into February, first up we have When the Stars Are Devoured. Now, I believe this is a debut adult fantasy romance, and the plot sounds really interesting. So in this story, we are following Alara, who is a rebellion leader who is trying to take down the king of this realm. Now, she thinks she's making some headway when she's able to capture the king's executioner. Now, the king's executioner is actually known as the Devourer because he's able to devour souls, which sounds absolutely horrifying. And I believe it's going to be a romance between the two of them, so very enemies to lovers, and it just sounds so good. And releasing in early January is The Rose Garden, which is a young adult fantasy romance that is apparently perfect for fans of Bridgerton. So it is set in the early 1800s, where an immortal fae queen ends up ruling Britain, and our main character, who is desperate to save her family's crumbling reputation, ends up entering a competition in the hopes of securing the prince's hand. Now, when she gets there, she realizes that there is a lot more to this competition than meets the eye. I do think this plays around with like the trickster fae trope, which I absolutely love, where everything has a bit of a double meaning. And I believe she ends up enlisting the king or the heir's younger brother for help. And there is a romance. I have a feeling the romance will probably be with the brother, but we shall see. Now, I don't read a ton of young adult anymore, but this one does sound really good, so I'm hoping to pick this up in February. And the next two books are both sequels. So first up we have Rebel Witch, which is releasing in late February, and this is the sequel to Heartless Hunter, which is a YA fantasy romance. If you're unfamiliar with the plot, we are following a girl that is secretly a witch in a community where if it was found out she was a witch, she would be executed. So she's also a vigilante. Now, she does believe that people are starting to suspect who she might be, so she ends up fake dating a witch hunter to kind of get them off her trail. Now, this witch hunter also has his suspicions about our main character, so he honestly only agrees to date her so he can figure out if she actually is a witch or not. And it's their romance. It was really fun. It reminded me a lot of Serpent and Dove, so I'm still interested. I'm not exactly sure if I will continue with the series, but the next book is releasing in 2025. Next up is Kingdom of the Claw, which is the sequel to Road of Bones, which I believe is an adult fantasy romance that is Viking-inspired. Now, I have not read Road of Bones, however, two of my patrons recently picked it up, and both of them really enjoyed it, so I might add it to my December TBR if I can squeeze it in, especially now that I know it features Vikings. Now, I don't know very much about this book at all, other than we are following a girl that after, I believe her father passes away, his dying wish is that she go through the Road of Bones to try to get to some town named Coda, or a place named Coda. And while she is there, she ends up joining up with a group of, I'm assuming Vikings at this point, and I believe there are people chasing her and she's on the run. And apparently it's enemies to lovers, slow burn romance, and it sounds really good. So once again, hopefully I will be picking up the first book in December, and the second book releases this February. And last up for books releasing in February, we have Trials of Darkness. Now, this is an adult dark fantasy romance, and if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I adore dark fantasy romance, so I am so happy there are a few on this list. It seems like they're becoming more popular. But in this story, we are following Briar, and Briar lives under the shadow of her father's tyrannical rule. He is a king, and Briar is absolutely mortified when her father proposes an arranged marriage. So he is going to hold some sort of tournament, and the victor will win her hand in marriage. So Briar decides to take things into her own hands and fight for herself. So seems a little bit like Brave, the movie, but either way, it sounds so unbelievably good. So I cannot wait for this book to release. And surprisingly, for March, there's only one book, so it is A Harvest of Hearts, which is an adult fantasy romance. And in this story, we are following Foss, who is just a ordinary village girl who never suspected that she would be cursed by the one and only sorcerer living in this village named Sylvester. So Sylvester curses Foss to have to take care and clean his house, and I believe Foss is trying to find a way out of this predicament. And there might be a romance between her and Sylvester, but I'm not exactly positive. But while I was reading the plot synopsis, it was really giving Howl's Moving Castle vibes, and then to no surprise, at the very bottom it said perfect for fans of Howl's Moving Castle. So I think the magic works by ingesting hearts, and I don't know, I just think that's a really cool premise. So another book I'm very excited to pick up once it releases. And moving into April, I am most excited for Firebird by Juliet Cross. This is apparently an epic romantasy that is perfect for fans of House of the Dragon and From Blood and Ash, two of my absolute favorite things. It's also written by Juliet Cross, one of my favorite authors. So I just know I'm gonna love this book. So apparently this is following a dragon shifter general who is on a battlefield where he sees this girl that he once harbored feelings for from afar in grave danger. So he ends up shifting into his dragon form, which I guess he is not supposed to do, in order to save her life, and then they both end up going on the run, and there is some sort of connection between them that neither of them can really sever, and it sounds like I will love this book. So another book I just cannot wait to read. And next up is A Thorn in Every Heart. This is an adult fantasy romance that is inspired by a certain tale. Now, the story is following a young woman named Alex, who is a musician, and after a divorce really shatters her life, Alex ends up moving to an Appalachian town trying to start over. Well, shortly after getting there, she is captured by a beastly Fae prince who takes her to the Fae realm and informs her that her grandmother broke a promise to him 60 years prior, and if he does not marry her, then she is going to have to deal with the consequences. And it goes from there. So it is loosely inspired by Beauty and the Beast, and it sounds so unbelievably good. I'd also like to give a shout out to my friend April from Happily Ever April. She is also doing a anticipated 2025 fantasy romance release video, I believe, but she was posting notes about it in her stories, and I saw this title and I didn't recognize it. I'm like 90% sure I got it from April. I put April's name next to it. If not, it was the book prior to this. Sorry, April. But anyway, I got one of those titles from April, and I wanted to give her credit because I had never heard of the book before. So April is an amazing resource when it comes to fantasy romance and monster romance and just unhinged romance in general. She always finds really unique reads, and I've gotten so many amazing book recs from her. So I will have her channel linked down in the description below, and make sure to check her out. And next up is Sweet Obsession by Katie Robert. I do believe this is part of her Dark Olympus series, and from what I remember, you can read all of these books as standalones. So this is following Poseidon and Icarus, so it does feature an MM romance. And in this book, Icarus is the prisoner of Poseidon, and Poseidon is getting ready for a war. He believes that Circe is mounting an attack against him and his people, and all while this is going on, he is starting to develop some feelings towards his captive. So Poseidon has to decide where his loyalties lie. Will he try to save his people and counter an attack, or will he choose love? And I don't know, it sounds really good. I know I've been saying that about all of these books, but Katie Robert, when it comes to spice, she is unparalleled. I absolutely love her Touch of Taboo series. I haven't been caught up with all of her Dark Olympus books. However, I have really enjoyed the ones I've read, especially the first book, Neon Gods, Hades Persephone. Oh my gosh, that book is amazing and one of my favorite Hades and Persephone retellings. So, highly recommend. And last up for April is Enchantra. Now, in this story, we are following Genevieve Grimm. who ends up accepting an invitation to a very grand Italian palace in the hopes of finding adventure and magic. Now, when she gets there, she is immediately thrust into a deadly game of hide and seek, and she realizes the consequences to this are very dire when she discovers that if you lose this game, you are condemned to the depths of hell. So I thought this was going to be a direct sequel to Phantasma until I looked into the plot summary, and honestly, I would have been okay with that because I loved Phantasma. But I'm really excited that we get to follow new characters and it's just set into the same world. So I absolutely love Kaylee Smith's writing, and I know this is going to be a 5-star. So moving into May, it was recently announced that Demi Perry would be writing her first romantasy novel. So it is called Shield of Sparrows, and I have really high hopes for this book. Unfortunately, Goodreads doesn't give me a lot to go on. All I know about this is it is pitched as The Witcher meets Cinderella, a spicy romantasy following a young woman that in order to fulfill an ancient treaty, she must travel with a notorious monster slayer. I guess that's where it's getting the Witcher vibes from. But I really love that a lot of these romance authors are moving towards romantasy. Not to say there's anything wrong with contemporary romance, but some of them have been absolutely amazing. I know Callie Hart typically only wrote dark and contemporary romance, and then she came out with Quicksilver, and that was one of my top reads of the year. So I cannot wait to read Shield of Sparrows. And next up is one of my most anticipated sequels. So it is A Curse Carved in Bone, which is the sequel to A Fate Inked in Lies by Danielle L. Jensen, which is a Norse-inspired fantasy romance that I loved this year. It is one of my top reads of 2024. And I have been waiting for that sequel because the ending of A Fate Inked in Blood, I need to know what happens next. But if you're unfamiliar with A Fate Inked in Blood, we are following a woman that is in a loveless marriage, and that is made very apparent when her husband has her fight to the death against a Viking warrior. Now, during this fight, it is shown that the main character, named Freya, actually harbors a drop of goddess blood that allows her to have a shielding ability. Now, it turns out her husband actually already knew this and was just using this fight as a way to prove that. So now Freya is going to be used by all of these different Viking tribes that want to use her to try to win a war. And it's really just Freya trying to find her own autonomy and freedom and not have to fulfill the prophecy that is apparently about her. There's also a romance, and I just really, really enjoyed it. So the day that audiobook drops, I will be reading the sequel. And last up is The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. This is a adult dark fantasy romance. The story is following Sybil, and Sybil is a diviner, and she is being plagued by visions of these otherworldly omens that are promising death and destruction while she is sleeping. Now, her time at the cathedral is slowly coming to an end. However, Sybil notices that other diviners are slowly going missing. So she ends up reluctantly asking the help of a heretical knight. I cannot say that word to save my life, but he essentially doesn't believe in the religion that everyone else believes in. And she ends up teaming up with him in the hopes that he will help her solve why the other diviners are going missing. And it sounds so unbelievably good. I know I've been saying that about pretty much every book, but Rachel Gillig is the same author that wrote One Dark Window, which is a gothic YA duology that I know a lot of people really, really enjoyed. Unfortunately, I was not one of them. However, I'm really interested to see what this author does with an adult fantasy romance story. I feel like I'm gonna like this one just a little bit more. All right, guys, we are a little more than halfway through, and I am starting to lose my voice, so I'm gonna start talking a little faster. So moving into June, we have A Forgery of Fate, which is a YA romantasy following True. Now, True is a very talented art forger and is also able to paint the future. And in order to save her family from ruin, she ends up agreeing to marry the notorious Dragon Lord and help him to, I believe, assassinate the Dragon King. Now, it does say this is inspired by Beauty and the Beast, and none of that plot synopsis really gives me Beauty and the Beast vibes, but I am still very interested. So this is releasing in early June. And also releasing in June is Realm of Thieves. Now, this is an adult fantasy romance that features dragons. So in this story, we are following Brynla, who is a thief that steals dragon eggs. Now, her world is turned completely upside down when she is kidnapped by Andor, who is an enforcer for a rival criminal empire. And I believe it's their romance, but it's a fantasy romance that features dragons, so I am all about it. And the last two books releasing in June are both sequels. So we have The Primal of Blood and Bone, which I believe is the last book in the From Blood and Ash series, which is absolutely insane. So unfortunately, I am not caught up on that series, so I really can't give you any idea what that book is about. But if you're unfamiliar with From Blood and Ash, it is the series that started my booktube channel. So we are following Poppy, who has been raised in isolation as the Maiden, getting ready for her ascension. We don't exactly know what that is, we just know it's a ritual. So one day Poppy decides she wants to live a little bit. She goes out in disguise to the Red Pearl, where she has an altercation with Hawk, who is the very attractive new member of the Rise Guard. They have a brief fling, and then they go their separate ways. And soon after, Hawk ends up being assigned as Poppy's personal guard and slowly takes her into his world. And it goes from there, and the story is so freaking good. I love it. It has every single paranormal creature you could want, werewolves, vampires. It's just, and the romance is fantastic. So I will say it does feel like the series has been dragged out a little bit too long, similar to Zodiac Academy, but still, it is one of my absolute favorites. And last up for June is The Robin and the Oak Tree, which is the sequel to The Wren and the Holly Library. Now, honestly, it took me forever to read The Wren in the Holly Library. I had heard kind of mixed reviews, but it was one of my favorite reads of 2024. It is filled with Celtic mythology and the magic. I just really enjoyed it, although it is pitched as a Beauty and the Beast reimagining, and I don't really think it has those vibes. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Wren and Holly Library, we are following this thief that lives in a post-apocalyptic world where monsters are ruling along with humans, and she ends up breaking into a library that she does not realize is owned by a monster, who promptly captures her and says, "Hey, I won't kill you, but in exchange, you need to help me acquire a certain object that I think you might be able to acquire." And it goes from there. And overall, I just really enjoyed The Wren and the Holly Library and cannot wait to read the sequel. And moving into July, I only have one book, so it is The Arcana Academy by Elise Kova. This is an adult dark fantasy romance, and we are following Clara, who is a thief who also harbors a forbidden magic. Now, she is able to escape a prison sentence by making a deal with the prince of this kingdom. She will pretend to be his fiancé, allowing her to enter Arcana Academy, where he hopes she will be able to find a magical tarot card that is able to somehow save the kingdom. So I believe this also features fake dating. This is also by Elise Kova, who's one of my favorite fantasy romance authors. However, I feel like I've only really read YA fantasy romance from her, maybe a few adult standalones, but I'm very interested to see what she does with a dark adult fantasy romance. And skipping all the way to October, the last two books are both sequels. So first up we have The Ballad of Falling Dragons, which is the sequel to When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker, another one of my top fantasy romance reads of 2024. So I do a terrible job of summarizing this book, but just know this book is beautifully written. It is a little bit wordy, but we're essentially following this girl that is part of a rebel group, and while she is going to try to take someone out, she is captured and thrown into prison. Now, while she is in prison, we're also following another prince who is actually mourning somebody who he has lost and is searching for shards of a dragon that have fallen from the sky. And while searching for said shards, he stumbles upon our other main character in prison. He ends up breaking her out, and together they both kind of go on this journey, and it really goes from there. But what I say about this book pretty much every time I pitch it is the way it is written, it's almost like you're trying to solve a puzzle as you are reading. Nothing is super clear, and I honestly enjoyed that about the book. But overall, one of my favorite reads of the year, and I cannot wait for the sequel. And the last book on this list is Bonds of Hercules, which is the sequel to Blood of Hercules that I finished 2 days ago and is one of my favorite Why Choose romances of all time. Oh my gosh, I love this book so much. It is filled with dark humor. It's like a grittier, darker version of Percy Jackson, but with a female heroine and a lot more spice, and I just absolutely loved it. So in the story of Blood and Hercules, we are following a girl named Alexis who lives in this dystopian world where Titans, essentially the Titans from Olympus, have attacked and are really plaguing the earth, and the only beings able to stop them are gods and Spartans. So there is no sort of government anymore, really just the gods and the Spartans rule, and Alexis is a foster child, and unfortunately there's no one really supervising her foster placement. So her parents are horribly abusive to her, and Alexis is just trying to get by. So one day when she comes of age, she ends up taking a test and her blood is taken, and it shows that she actually possesses Spartan blood. So she is whisked away to a Spartan war college where she has to fight to the death. It is so, so good. So please, if you like Why Choose Romance, dark humor, you're okay with some blood and gore, highly recommend checking out Blood of Hercules. Alright guys, that is it for my most anticipated releases of 2025. I am positive I missed a few books, so if there are any books you're really excited that are releasing next year, please leave them down in the comments below. And I'd like to say a special thank you to my Paladin protectors, Amanda, Erin, Leslie, Kat, Lotta, and Jess. Thank you guys so much for supporting my channel. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye!